Welcome to Voices of Esalen. I'm Sam Stern. My guest today is Sara Gael, Harm Reduction Officer at the MAPS-sponsored Zendo project. Sara received her master's degree in transpersonal counseling psychology at Naropa University. She started working with MAPS in 2012, coordinating psychedelic harm reduction services at festivals and events worldwide with the Zendo project. Sara served as Director of Harm Reduction at MAPS from 2017 to 2020, and she continues to train individuals and organizations in principles of psychedelic peer support. Sara is a therapist from MAPS clinical trials of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD in Boulder, Colorado, and she also maintains a private practice as a psychotherapist specializing in trauma, integration, non-ordinary states of consciousness, and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. She's presented at conferences, universities, and events around the world, serves on the board of directors at DanceSafe, and as the harm reduction advocate on the City of Denver's psilocybin policy review panel. Sara believes that developing a comprehensive understanding of psychedelic medicines through research and education is essential for the health and well-being of individuals, communities, and the planet. Before we get into all that, do you want to know more about sacred plant medicine and psilocybin? If you're interested, I encourage you to register for Esalen's upcoming series with Entheo Wheel. Learn everything you want to know as Esalen presents DNA Journey's Entheo Wheel, the ceremony and science of psilocybin. This educational and experiential event will be live streamed from Esalen from April 23rd to April 26th, 2021. The online odyssey will be guided by Jyoti Ma, Sochil Ash, Paul Stamets and Pam Kriskow, East Forest, Milana Snow, Justin Beretta, Alan Bediner, Dream Mulick, James Fadiman, Robin Carhart Harris, Grace O, Rada Wapner, and a digital transmission from Francois Borzat. So secure your place for this online experience now with the link in our show notes or go to esalen.org/visit. Also, scholarships for BIPOC folks who want to attend are available. Just use the link in our show notes to apply. Now here's Sara Gael.
Yeah, so I thought it might be useful to start kind of broadly and ask you, what is the Zendo project for those who don't know?
Yeah, so the Zendo project is a department or a project of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS, and it is the flagship program of our harm reduction department. And the Zendo project officially started in 2012 with an event that we did, or with services that we provided at Burning Man. We help people at events and festivals primarily who are having challenging psychedelic experiences, challenging emotional responses to psychedelics. We are a emotional support service, so we don't provide medical care. We work with the event and festival medical in order to help people who are having any medical crises. And we have been providing these services at dozens of events all around the world. And since 2012, we've been able to assist over 6,000 people in our space. We also train people and provide education and outreach focused on drug education and helping people be more responsible, aware, and intentional around their substance use, specifically psychedelic, but other as well.
Why do you think harm reduction in particular is so crucial in regards to psychedelics and also the way that they're integrated into everyday society?
Yeah, so what a lot of listeners are likely aware of is that we're in the middle of this huge psychedelic renaissance. Every day there's more and more information coming out around the potential benefits of psychedelics in therapy and healing, and also widespread decriminalization here in the US, really starting to change the landscape of psychedelic substances. And we're seeing that more of the general population is becoming more both aware as well as interested, and the stigma is really starting to shift and change. The sort of decades-long stigma around psychedelics that really began in earnest, I think, in the 60s. And so right now we're really seeing that there's a big shift and people are really starting to wake up and become aware of the potential possibilities of integration of psychedelics into society. And At MAPS and with the Zendo project, we really feel that it's important that as we explore the potential benefits of psychedelics, that we also make room to address the risks associated with psychedelic use. There's risks associated with the use of any substance, whether it's illicit or not. Pharmaceutical drugs also have risks. And so we really believe that if we are going to responsibly really discuss as a society the benefits, that we also have to be aware of and be informed and help inform others about how to navigate the complex terrain of psychedelics. So psychedelics can have effects that are very varied and are, by their nature, can help people access really expanded states of consciousness. And because of that, there's potential for people to have challenging experiences, emotionally, psychologically challenging experiences. It's very vast and at times challenging and difficult terrain. Here at the Zendo project, we really believe that it's our responsibility to assist in the education of society and make sure that people are just aware of all of the information that is out there and that people are developing around psychedelic substances.
So you mentioned that the Zendo project has been around since 2012. Were there any precursors to the Zendo project that Zendo was modeled around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So MAPS has actually been doing harm reduction and what we call psychedelic peer support services since really the early 2000s. And MAPS was involved in helping to bring volunteers to festivals and events and help other groups and communities offer peer support services at their events. And we did this at places like Burning Man, like Boom Festival in Portugal, where drugs are decriminalized for personal use in Portugal, Shambhala in Canada, and a few other smaller events all around the world. So even though the Zendo project wasn't formally formed until 2012, MAPS hasn't been involved in this work for a while, for about 20 years now. The work that we do at MAPS around harm reduction is really informed by decades of knowledge, wisdom, tools, techniques, and information that has been developed and built by the psychedelic movement and by people who've been involved in psychedelic research, psychedelic therapy, both underground as well as above ground, as well as people who have just been going to or exploring, psychonauts who've been exploring psychedelic medicines for a very long time. And we also believe that it's really important to pay homage as well to centuries of indigenous use of these medicines and learn from past practices around. There are cultures, have been and still are cultures that have integrated psychedelic medicines into their practices, and so there's a lot of information out there. And so when MAPS developed the Zendo project, we created a manual. It was our volunteer training manual. And we drew from all of these different areas and people who had developed expertise after years and years of studying and exploring with these medicines.
How do you deal with a situation if it becomes kind of violent or aggressive? You mentioned working in tandem with medical teams. And could you just speak a bit to that?
Yeah, so we do, we're really lucky at festivals and events to, they're kind of these little microcosms of society in a way, where you do have people who are working. You have medics, you have security, you have law enforcement at these events, you have different other organizations that might be providing, crisis intervention teams, mental health crisis intervention teams, and things like that. So we really have the opportunity to collaborate with these different departments at the events that we work at. And it's really necessary. We couldn't really do this work at events if they weren't these other departments that are open and willing to collaborate with us. So our success really depends on this collaboration. People do have experiences on psychedelics where they might, their behavior and their awareness of themselves and their boundaries and the boundaries of others may not be really intact. And so when that happens, if someone does become aggressive, we do have tools that we teach our volunteers and our staff to help de-escalate situations. And really there's a lot that can be done. Between the line between aggressive and violent is actually an interesting one, right? Because one of the things that we see in the Zendo is that emotions are coming up for people that they may have repressed, that the psychedelic is catalyzing the release of some emotion. And one of those emotions can be anger. And anger is just like other emotions, often really vilified in our society. We don't really have tools for transmuting, working with anger. I believe that there's a lot that we need to do as humans to learn how to make relationship with our anger. And so a lot of what we do is recognizing the importance of people tapping into the emotion of anger, to help set boundaries around expression. So, it's okay to feel this, it's okay to express this, but you can't express it in violent ways. So there's a lot that can be done to help de-escalate a situation. And what we see with some of the outdated ways of dealing with people who are having behavioral adverse experiences on psychedelics are very heavy-handed ways. And part of what the Zendo really does is we focus on de-escalation. We're a non-restrained, non-sedate model. So if a situation does escalate into violence, then we do work with the security staff at events. And then if they need additional support or we need additional support, then at times that we also have worked alongside law enforcement as well.
So what do you envision as the future of the Zendo project? Where would you like to see it go, and in which ways would you like to see it grow?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, right now with COVID, and obviously we're having this conversation, and events and festivals are not happening. And
right.
we've really, since the quarantines began, we really have been focusing our efforts as a department towards our education, outreach, and curriculum. So just because there's not events and festivals doesn't mean that there's not psychedelic use happening, and many people are still choosing to use psychedelics in their homes. I really feel that the Zendo Project's work has never been just to remain in events and festivals. I see transformational festivals as these places where we come together as community, and we try and we experiment at different ways of trying to create a better world. And so I see that these festivals and events, it's always going to be important to have these types of services at places where people are taking psychedelics in large gatherings. Mass gatherings they're going to come back, most likely. They're always going to be a staple and part of humans love to gather together. And so that will always be important. But I really see that the work that we've been doing with the Zendo Project has always been about being able to take what we've learned at these festivals and taking them out into society. So we're doing that right now, a few different initiatives. So right now we're really focused on expanding our curriculum, and we're going to be looking at all of what we've learned over the years in our manual and everything that we've created, and we're looking at how to get that curriculum out to more people, to more countries, in some way. So we've been doing these public trainings for many years where people come and we have these day-long peer support trainings. And so we're working to integrate those more into an online format, and we're working to bring this training and this education and outreach to more communities. And that includes other professional communities as well. So, what we do is peer support. So our volunteers come from a wide variety of backgrounds, but the work that we do is also really applicable to other professionals who might encounter people who are having challenging psychedelic experiences. And that includes paramedics, law enforcement, security, social workers, like social worker response units, behavioral health, people who deal with behavioral health situations involving substances. And so we're working right now actually with the city of Denver to help implement a multi-responder harm reduction training for those particular departments. And so that's one of the things that we're really focused on here in Denver. And one of the reasons we're able to do that here in Denver is because psilocybin was decriminalized in 2019. And so we are working with the city of Denver, I actually have been sitting on a panel when the initiative passed in 2019. Part of that, the agreement with the city was that a panel would be put together that would include members of the community, members of other public health and safety departments, law enforcement, and the district attorney, and as well as some psychedelic advocates and activists. And so I joined that panel in 2019 and as a harm reduction advocate. And so as part of that panel and with collaboration with MAPS, we are working on developing this citywide curriculum. So that's some of what we've been up to with not having events and festivals this year.
Well, it's kind of interesting when I think about harm reduction in regards to psychedelics. Obviously, it just kind of gives a good name to the entire project. It kind of underpins it with positive regard for humans. And when I think about festivals, it's kind of just so cool that there's an organization that are gathered there to give some sort of therapeutic support, whether it's for psychedelics or not. I mean, these situations can be challenging. I was listening to an interview that you did with, I believe it was Psychedelics Today, where you mentioned that not everybody who comes to the Zendo project is actually on psychedelics.
Yeah, and that number has really, the percentage of people who come to us who are not actually on a substance has, I think, increased over the years as people have become more aware of the work that we do. So, once we've been at an event for a couple years, then the attendees start to catch on and learn about what we do. And then oftentimes at these events, or most often, there's not really a place where people can go and just receive uninterrupted support from someone who, during their volunteer shift, their sole purpose is just to be there and and listen and provide that support. And so I think people recognize that that's a gift. And I think that when they're having challenging times, if they can recognize that those services are available and come to us, it's wonderful. I think it's a great evolution of the service. And you're right, things are really challenging. Things are really difficult at festivals, events, and just in everyday life. And people need that support. And I think that the kind of real world, or not real world, but the kind of application of that to the rest of society, I think, is that peer support services, I believe, we're going to start seeing, psychedelic or otherwise, are going to be, I think, really important in mental health in the coming years. And, I kind of see COVID as a psychedelic in itself, where we call psychedelics these non-specific amplifiers. And I really feel that's what COVID's done. It's really amplified so many things in our society that need healing. It's amplified inequity. It's amplified societal issues, the failures of our medical system, of our mental health system, of our political system. And we're really starting to see, through the veil of all of these different systems that are really built upon paradigms that are crumbling right now, old paradigms of colonialist patriarchal frameworks that are now really just coming apart at the seams. So I think that peer support, one of those systems that we're seeing is the mental health system and the failures of the mental health system. And I think that I think it's going to be really important for alternative models of emotional support, like peer support, to be able to be available to people. There's situations and times where what people need is therapy and professional therapy support. And then I think there's a huge gap where people could just use some emotional support from their peers. And so I think that we'll start to see peer support really step in to fill that role in the coming years.
Mm. You've worked on both phase 2 and phase 3 of the MAPS MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working with, so in addition to the work that I've been doing with the Zendo project, I have been working with MAPS and MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. And I've been a therapist on the phase 2 and phase 3 studies since about 2013. We have just recently completed our first of 2 phase 3 studies in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress. We're really seeing some promising results from this research, and we this has been going on. Rick started MAPS in 1986, and that was around the time that MDMA became a Schedule I substance with no real, that wasn't really a research or fact-informed decision. Over the past 30 plus years, Rick has really focused all of his attention, and MAPS's primary and main focus has been obviously doing this research to explore the potential for MDMA in treating PTSD.
So let me ask you, are there elements to your work with psychedelic therapy that have kind of seeped into your clinical practice with clients who don't use psychedelics? Has the psychedelic experience taught you about modes of human psychology, the way we process things, the way we can work through things?
Yeah, so I think it might be helpful for the listeners to know that in addition to MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, that one of the other substances, psychedelics that I've worked with in a therapeutic capacity has been ketamine. And I was a practitioner of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for a couple of years here at a clinic in Boulder. And yeah, I think that one of the things that working with psychedelics has given me insight into is people's defense mechanisms. So psychedelics can really help with helping people get out of their own way. Some of those defense mechanisms can fall away with MDMA. People can feel more open, connected, less fear. So kind of the normal or the regular defense mechanisms that come into play that kind of keep people from being able to do deep healing work. I've seen that, psychedelics have helped me understand more about those blocks that people have and the wisdom of those blocks. I think that one of the things that we see in therapy that can be so challenging with people is the unconscious resistance to looking at things, because it's understandable. We experience traumatic events in our lives. It's painful to go back and feel those things, to feel those emotions and have those memories. And so it's understandable that we sort of disconnect or try to push those things away. And I think that one of the things that psychedelics have the potential to do in the right set and setting is to really help people move past that, to be able to access some of these repressed feelings, thoughts, and memories, and to be able to start to learn from their past and be able to integrate those experiences into their lives so that they're no longer operating from a trauma standpoint, from a lens of seeing the world through their trauma and through their past, but are able to kind of integrate their past experiences so that they can move forward. Yeah, and also the mode of therapy that I'm trained in, or one of the modes, is transpersonal counseling psychology, which really kind of emerged as a modality and practice from the psychedelic 60s. So it's really informed by the exploration of non-ordinary states of consciousness, which can be accessed in many ways, not just psychedelics, meditation, dance, movement, all kinds of things. And so having that transpersonal framework is really a lot about seeing that people are really embedded within the systemic structures that we are a part of, and that we are consistently impacted and affected by those structures. So rather than seeing an individual who's struggling and suffering as just in their own little isolated bubble, and that everything that's going on for them is just their own biographical experience, relating people's suffering and pain to what's going on in the world right now. And I think right now we're seeing that at a time now that's become really clear, how what's happening in the world around us is directly impacting, now it's normal with COVID right now for people to just, be like, everything sucks. It's COVID, right? And so transpersonal therapy kind of looks at like that's always going on. It didn't just happen when COVID started, that we're really impacted by all of these external things. And I think that working with psychedelics just really helped me see how we're all connected, and how even though as individuals we have our own biographical experiences that contribute to how we perceive ourselves in the world, that our experience of the world is also there's a thread that runs through all of us, this kind of human collective thread of both human suffering, but as well as the human capacity for joy and connection and relationship. So I think psychedelics have helped me really see people as really embedded within a larger framework that is both influenced by the individual as well as influences the individual.
That's a really interesting answer. Thank you for that depth there. What psychedelic do you find most exciting from a clinical perspective, through your experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have obviously a biased experience because most of my work has been with MDMA, and so that's what I've been primarily focused on. And I do believe that a lot of symptoms that people experience that are often categorized as depression, anxiety, I think often have roots in trauma. So I think that it's really important for us to heal trauma, because I think that it really is a root cause of many other symptoms. So I feel I do get really excited about MDMA and the continued potential of MDMA for the treatment of trauma. And I think that it's important to state too that, all psychedelics have their place. They all have, also everyone responds and reacts differently to different psychedelics. And so I think that we'll start seeing, as substances are decriminalized, as they are medicalized, as they're rescheduled, we'll start to be able to open the door to the vast potential of all of these unique, distinct psychedelics. But I think that eventually the vision is that, that there'll be many different psychedelics accessible and available for people to use in a healing capacity, or eventually for personal use as well, to be able to explore for people who are healthy without the fear of legal repercussions. So I think the future is that people will be able to call on and bring in the different potentials of different psychedelics. But yeah, I'm definitely, because I've been doing the research in MDMA and seeing the transformations that people go through, I definitely am really excited about the future of MDMA.
One thing that I think is really cool about what you do and what Rick Doblin does and kind of the MAPS mission is that, partly what you're focusing on is psychedelics within the clinical setting, what it can do with therapy. But also, if you're talking about harm reduction, it's generally about the ways that people deal with psychedelics when they're not in a therapeutic setting. So you're walking the line here. And I understand that the way that psychedelics are going to be sort of accepted by society is through a medicalized or psychotherapeutic model. But yeah, this is just sort of an open-ended question. Do you find that the most potential for good happens within the therapeutic context, where you have these like a team of therapists helping people out? Or do you feel that it could happen within the framework of a peer-to-peer festival-based setting?
Yeah, well, one thing that I think, I believe that there's actually multiple pathways towards societal integration of psychedelics. And we see that now. We see that the policies are changing, and politics are changing. And with the recent election, really seeing, these multiple cities and states, it becoming sort of a bipartisan, like Republicans, Democrats, everyone kind of saying, actually, let's decriminalize these substances. And so I think that we are starting to see that there's big political shifts and changes. And I think that we're getting there by different routes. I think medicalization is one route, decriminalization is another route. And everyone has their route. So some people will only want to explore psychedelics within a therapeutic medical setting, in therapy, and also may only be interested in psychedelics if it is through that medical framework. Like some people are just more attuned with that way of doing things. And then I think that there'll be emerging community models of wellness and health where people are not using that dominant medical system, but are exploring psychedelics through either community health frameworks like peer support or just in community. And it's frustrating that I think what we've had to do now is we've had to, a lot of things that a lot of people knew, psychedelic explorers and researchers, a lot of things that were maybe obvious to some people of the potential healing and therapeutic benefits of different psychedelics. Because of prohibition and the war on drugs, we've now had to prove that these substances have value.
Why do you think that there's this kind of curiosity around social justice by the players in the field of psychedelics? Can you talk a little bit about the effort by MAPS to make this a broad-based initiative that is accessible to a lot of people and highlights a lot of voices?
I think one of the things that people can at times, not always, but some of the things that people might recognize or become aware of when they're on a psychedelic, in a psychedelic state, is our interconnection. And the awareness that, as we were talking about earlier, that there's this thread of that connects us all. And I think that if you just stop there and don't actually do the work to integrate those realizations into actual activism, into actual on the ground work to dismantle systems of oppression, systems of racism, it's lazy and it is ineffective. And it's important for us to, I think, to recognize that, you know, these systems of oppression, they have influenced and have been embedded within the framework of the psychedelic movement, just as they're embedded within the framework of all aspects of society right now. So I think what people are waking up to and starting to become aware of within the psychedelic movement is that it has been very white, it has been very disproportionately focused on white people. And we especially because MAPS focuses on trauma and the healing of trauma and treating trauma, and we know that trauma affects communities of color at a disproportionate level. We can't ethically treat trauma without also ensuring that we are making sure that our efforts, that we are focused on accessibility and making sure that we are getting this care and this treatment out to everyone, and especially those who within our society who have been the most harmed, the most marginalized. And you know, traditionally we see with medicine and therapy that the available services and care for people of color is grossly less. And so it's important as an organization, if we're focusing on the healing of trauma, to make sure that we include everyone. And that includes the people who are receiving treatment and the people who are in the studies, and once it is approved by the FDA in the future, for the people who are receiving the treatment once it's approved, as well as for the therapists and training therapists of color to ensure that we have a diversity of therapists who are able to bring this work into their communities.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. That was really eloquent, and it makes so much sense when you bring in this focus on trauma. It's really all about the trauma. Could you talk a little bit about the ways that MDMA can be effective with regards to trauma in a clinical setting?
Yeah. So first, it's really important to name that what MAPS is doing is MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. So it's not just people receiving the drug, it's in conjunction with psychotherapy. And that we are looking about how it may be useful for treating PTSD. And we're still learning about how MDMA impacts the brain and help kind of the mechanisms of action for how it might work. But some things that we do know about MDMA is that it can help to attenuate the fear response of any perceived threat to, a threat to sense of self, a sense of safety. It can decrease defensiveness, and it can do that without blocking access to past traumatic memories. And it also can allow people to potentially have a deep and genuine experience of emotions as it relates to the trauma. And what we think, some of what we think is happening is that the elimination of kind of these patterned, conditioned fear responses that come up when people try to treat trauma, just naturally come up, can lead to a more open and comfortable communication about these past traumatic experiences, and then greater access to any information about them. So one of the biggest challenges in psychotherapy when you're treating trauma without MDMA, or just in general, is that when people try to talk about their trauma or feel it or process past traumatic memories, that this fear response really keeps them from being able to access and process these memories. So the participants are able to experience and express different emotions that relate to the trauma, like anger and grief, with less likelihood of those feelings overwhelming them completely. It also seems to help support internal awareness that even our most painful feelings and memories that might arise are also a potentially important part of our growth and of the therapeutic process. And then some of the other things that we are learning is that, in addition, like feelings of empathy and appreciation and connection and love can emerge, and that can support the healing process as well. So it's not just about processing challenging, difficult memories and emotions, but it's also helping people connect to a sense of love and a sense of wellness and connection with what we call in the research, what we call the inner healer or the inner wisdom, be able to connect with some part of ourselves that is able to be present and that we're able to connect to in this MDMA experience. And that's something that I think can emerge potentially with other psychedelics as well. That connection to a sense of our own inner wisdom. So yeah, these are some of the things that we have been seeing in the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy.
That's great. Thank you so much for that informational piece. It's really helpful. My last question for you is, do you share what Michael Pollan has called kind of evangelical enthusiasm for psychedelics? So like, in other words, are there moments when you believe in the capacity of psychedelics themselves to bestow a knowledge of unity, oneness, connectedness that might affect some of the views and policy on some of the subjects we've discussed, such as racism or environmentalism?
An evangelical perspective. I think that, I think that psychedelics absolutely have the power to, what was the term that you used? The power to inform. I think that psychedelics can help unlock and make us aware of a lot of things that we're not aware of. And I think that they can catalyze awareness and transformation in people. But I think that it's really important to not think of them as some magic pill or plant or fungi that's just going to solve all the problems. I think that there's a lot of danger in framing psychedelics as like a cure-all, or that psychedelics alone are going to get us there. I think that the work ahead of us really requires deep healing on an individual level, and also that the individual healing doesn't in and of itself translate to institutional healing. And we're needing to do some really big institutional healing on our planet right now. And of course, institutions are made up of individuals. And so the more that we can have people, whether it's via psychedelics or many other ways that people are able to heal decades, if not centuries, of transgenerational trauma, and the way that we continue to perpetuate those cycles of trauma on one another, that needs to be attended to. And so I think that, yes, I believe that there is great power and potential for the integration of psychedelics into society, and I believe that that they have the potential to help catalyze and potentially speed up that process. And we do need things to happen relatively quickly right now. I'm an optimist, and we really need help. And so I think that I believe that these substances are here to assist us. They are not in and of themselves inherently going to shift those structures that continue to keep people locked into old colonialist paradigms and frameworks in which they're seeing the world through things like greed and the sort of things that continue to drive inequity and re-traumatization. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers the question. Yes, and or maybe no, and I don't know, but yeah.
Well, great. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. I got a lot out of our conversation and learned a lot, and good luck with your continuing work in this field.
Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, really good to speak with you today. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Esalen. Today's show is produced in conjunction with Peter Kobabe, Terry Gilby, and Michelle McCrary. Our music is by Nico Holloman. The Esalen Institute is a nonprofit organization. Our show is made possible by your contribution.